Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The husband decided to show his wife the compromising tape, and this is what it showed. Today's story is a similar story. Enjoy it! I've been driving for the last 2 hours, heading to the Marriott Hotel in Baltimore. My wife was there for a conference, and I was planning to surprise her by stopping by and inviting her to dinner. Do you think I am filled with love and tenderness for my wife? Nothing could be further from the truth. For the past 3 months, I have suspected that my wife is having an affair with one of her coworkers. I had an intuitive feeling that every time she went on another business trip, training, or conference, she was actually having a night with someone. So tonight, I was going to catch her in the act and end this once and for all. A little background. My wife Megan and I have been married for 14 years and have 2 wonderful children, 12-year-old Sarah and 10-year-old Todd. Before today's meeting, I dropped them off at my mom's house. Megan and I got married right after high school. During the last 2 years of study, we dated, and this rapid romance became a natural prelude to our marriage. Young Megan was a spectacular girl. By nature, she was always cheerful, slender, had long chestnut-colored hair, and was distinguished by her unusually chiseled and expressive features. Megan's figure still looks so flawless that not a single extra gram of fat can be found on it. Overall, I always thought we had a strong and loving marriage, until about 3 months ago when I began to suspect that something was going wrong. At first, it was just small things I couldn't understand or explain. I didn't want to pester Megan with questions or, especially, enter into a confrontation with her because I was afraid of seeming paranoid or jealous. The location of her workshop today was close enough that I could make a surprise visit and perhaps catch her in the act. I grabbed my business briefcase from the car and approached the administrator at the hotel lobby. "Hi, I'm Phil Jenkins," I introduced myself at the reception desk with a brief smile and a businesslike demeanor. My wife Megan came to an insurance conference and told me she was staying in room 214. She said I could get the key here. After tapping on the computer keyboard and checking the entries, the employee nodded and turned around to get the required key. "Can I see your ID, please?" he asked before handing it to me. "No problem, it's good you asked," I replied, taking out and showing my driver's license. With the key now in my possession, I felt nervous as I walked to the elevator. A variety of thoughts raced chaotically in my head. What will I do when I catch her? What will I say to both of them? Should I knock or just burst in? What if, in addition to the lock, the door is secured with a chain? Damn, what if Megan is alone in there? Will she even be in the room? As I came out of the elevator and walked along the corridor, I decided to simply insert the key into the lock and try to open the door. I tried to be as quiet as possible, moving the key in the lock millimeter by millimeter and barely audibly unlocking the door. I carefully opened it to find Megan sitting half-turned to me at the table with her open briefcase, doing paperwork. Apparently sensing something, she sharply turned around, jumped up in her chair, and gasped in surprise, pressing her hands to her chest. "Damn it, Phil, you scared me to death." "What the hell are you doing here?" she exclaimed, her fear mixed with irritation. "Hi, dear. I had a little free time and decided to drop in and invite you to dinner," I said automatically, giving the basic reason for my unexpected visit. "Well, you're staying the night, aren't you?" "I could use a little company," Megan said, having recovered from her shock. She came closer and kissed me deeply. It looks like my grand plan to catch my cheating wife had fallen apart and turned into a complete fiasco. "Do we have time for a quick joke before we head out to dinner?" I asked hopefully. "Hey, I need to take a shower first," Megan said, resting her fists on her waist and tilting her head to the side. "But I'll tell you what, how about I give you a quick pleasure before I rinse off? After we get back from dinner, we'll have the whole night to do whatever you want." She purred playfully. I loved this woman and did not want to lose her. "Well, that will be enough for now until dinner," she said, her voice satisfied. I opened my eyes to find her with a wide grin on her face. She easily rose from her knees, turned around, and walked into the bathroom to take a shower. I took advantage of the respite to clean myself up and fell onto the bed. Looking around, I noticed Megan's makeup bag lying on the dresser against the wall. I got out of bed and went over to see if she had any aspirin to help with the headache throbbing in my temples from the tiring drive. I didn't find any pills, but I did find something odd in the side pocket of her purse, a 6-pack of protections. Holding the protections in my hand and staring at them with confusion, I took a few steps back and collapsed onto the bed. After Todd was born, Megan started taking birth control pills, which made her constantly ill. We decided that I would have a vasectomy, so we no longer needed any contraception. It was a relief to get rid of any concerns about pills or protections. Naturally, I wondered why the hell there were these protections in her makeup bag, and in such quantities. I'm no fool and quickly came to the conclusion that my wonderful wife was indeed cheating on me. The pain in my head seemed to intensify with this realization. I didn't immediately know what to do with this knowledge, but one sensible thought did come to me. After rummaging around a little more in Megan's surprisingly well-stocked purse, I found a couple of safety pins she kept for emergencies with her clothes. Taking one of the pins, I carefully made almost invisible holes in the middle of each package of protections and then put the pins and protections back where I found them. Megan was still in the shower, seemingly humming over the sound of the water, so I took out my cell phone and called a friend of mine, Freddie. "Hey, Freddie, this is Phil." "Hi, Phil. What's up?" "I need a favor. Wait about an hour and then call me on my mobile, saying that a pipe burst at school and they need me as soon as possible. All you need to do is make the call. I'll handle everything else." "Got it, buddy. Thanks. I'll call you around 7. See you." After hanging up, I thought some more and decided I didn't really want to spend the night with Megan. I already felt regret for what we had done just a few minutes ago and didn't want to add anything more intimate to it. On the way home, I could carefully consider my situation and next steps. I knew I had to do something, but at that moment, I couldn't think of what. When Megan finally got out of the shower, the main thing for me was to restrain myself and avoid starting a confrontation right in the room. This was a difficult task because I was boiling inside, and all I wanted was to inflict the same pain on her that she had inflicted on me. Frankly speaking, I am not a cruel person. I rarely lose my composure and try to stay calm. After careful thought, I decided it would be better if I didn't let her know I was aware of her infidelity, at least for now. By the time we got to the hotel restaurant, I was completely crushed by her betrayal. "Order what you want, dear. I can pay for everything," I suggested as casually as I could. "Well, I'm not that hungry," she said vaguely, studying the menu. "I think I'll just have a small fillet." "That sounds good to me too," I agreed. "How about adding a bottle of rose wine to your order?" After the waiter took our order, I couldn't resist probing a little. I asked a couple of questions that seemed completely innocent. "Megan, are you happy with the way our marriage is going?" I began, playing with the fork and knife with my fingertips. "Of course," she answered confidently. "I have a wonderful home, 2 wonderful children, and a loving husband. What more could I ask for?" "Oh, I don't know," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I sometimes wonder if I'm doing everything I can to make you happy. I'm so lucky to have such an amazing wife. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe it's true." "Oh, you silly thing," Megan said with a hint of tenderness in her voice. "So that's why you came all this way to see me? Well, honey, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I am absolutely happy and satisfied. And you, for your part, are doing everything right. A woman couldn't wish for a better husband than you," Megan said. The waiter brought our orders, and Megan and I spent the entire dinner making small talk about trivial matters. Just as the plates were being cleared away, my cell phone rang, the call I had been waiting for. After apologizing to Megan, I walked out of the dining room and into the lobby to avoid disturbing the other patrons. Pressing the phone to my ear, I waited a few minutes and then returned. It was Freddie. "There was a water pipe break at school," I told Megan, who looked at me questioningly. "I need to get back there as soon as possible." "Sorry, but I have to cancel our night together." A look of disappointment crossed Megan's face, but at that moment, I couldn't tell if it was genuine. Regardless, her immediate future didn't depend on whether I stayed or left. In any case, she would answer for betraying my trust. As we entered the elevator, Kirk Langford was just getting out. He was a business partner Megan always seemed to travel with. "Oh, hi Megan," he hesitated. "I went to your room to see if you wanted to have dinner, but no one answered my knock. Now I understand why. He extended his hand to me. I'm Kirk Langford. You must be Phil. Megan talks about you all the time. Phil came to stay with me for the night, Megan explained. But an emergency arose, and he has to return. Looks like I'll have to sleep alone again tonight, she sighed, casually complaining. It was not easy to shake hands with this colleague of my wife's while putting on a sweet smile. During the ride up in the elevator, I had to bring up the topic that had been bothering me. Megan, I would really like you to leave your job. I would feel safer if you didn't work with Kirk. We've discussed this before, and it's important to me. Megan, I already told you that I'm not going to quit my job, she replied, her voice tinged with displeasure. I love what I do, and I learn a lot from Kirk. What you really need to do is get over your paranoia about me and Kirk. We completed the journey to the room in silence. I gathered my unpacked bags, and after a quick, careless kiss, I went home. The entire way back, I couldn't stop thinking that Kirk would definitely stop by Megan's room right after dinner. I didn't even want to imagine what they would do next, given the anger overwhelming me. By the time I got home, I felt exhausted, mentally drained, and my head hurt almost worse than before. By evening, I had begun to hate my wife for what she had done to me. How I wished I could be one of those resourceful people who come up with clever ways to catch a cheating spouse. But I felt stunned and powerless. I couldn't even come up with a plausible reason not to have an intim with her. What I really wanted was a divorce, and the sooner the better, but I lacked strong enough evidence to present to her, let alone in court. I felt defeated, knowing my wife was cheating on me but being powerless to do anything about it. I wasn't going to tolerate it, but I needed external help. Megan returned home 2 days later, beaming with a happy smile, like a schoolgirl who had received straight A's. It was clear she had a great time at the conference, and apparently on the sidelines as well. This made me even angrier. I secretly checked her purse, and in the familiar inner pocket, there was only one protection left from the entire package, and yes, it still had the puncture I had made, invisible to the untrained eye. Intim with Megan that night was more routine than pleasurable. On Saturday, there was a traditional picnic for the insurance company Globus Insurance, where Megan worked. At least the kids had something to do. As for me, I was not looking forward to the day. I couldn't help but think that some people in the company might know what was going on, and to some extent, I felt like a cuckold. It was a very uncomfortable and unpleasant feeling. My imagination painted pictures of people around me casting grinning glances and exchanging meaningful looks. It's quite possible that none of this actually happened, but I still tried to keep a low profile to avoid becoming the butt of crude jokes. Of course, you could say I was a little paranoid, but I couldn't help it. Unlike me, Megan really enjoyed herself with everyone invited, especially Kirk. They didn't show their affection publicly, but they were definitely quite friendly with each other. Both of them ignored me, but at that moment, that suited me just fine. Hi, I'm Janet Langford, and you must be Phil Jenkins, a female voice suddenly said from behind and to the side. I turned around and was stunned. Until that moment, I thought my wife looked great, but Janet Langford was the epitome of a flamboyant pin-up beauty straight out of a magazine spread. Her head was adorned with long brown hair, and her large blue eyes were magnetic. Janet's figure was striking in its ideal proportions, even despite her small stature. The million-dollar question was, why would Kirk Langford cheat on such a beauty? Oh, excuse me, I said, finally catching myself as I realized I was blushing. You caught me daydreaming. Hello, yes, I'm Phil. Nice to meet you. Can we go somewhere and talk? Preferably somewhere without children or noisy people around. Janet asked, throwing a concerned look towards the lively crowd. Of course, let's take a walk along the lake, I readily suggested. Looks like no one here will miss me. Fine by me, she responded casually, waving her hand. About 100 meters from the picnic clearing, in relative solitude, there were several nice benches offering a picturesque view of the lake. We settled on one of them. I'm all ears. What would you like to talk about? I asked, breaking the brief silence. Janet seemed at a loss and hesitated before answering. You see, this is difficult for me. I don't know how best to tell you, she corrected herself. Let's just say this is a very sensitive topic. At that moment, I realized that she was talking about the affair. I decided to make it easier for her. You mean the affair between Kirk and my wife? I directly voiced the issue. Janet seemed visibly relieved and shared her own information with me. I've known about this for about 2 months, she said. I'm preparing to file for divorce, but I need a little help. I hired a detective to get me evidence of his infidelity, but my lawyer said I'd have a much better chance of winning the case if Megan agreed to testify or at least sign a notarized statement confirming their intimate relationship. What do you mean by evidence? I asked, seeking clarification. I have photographs and recordings of telephone conversations. The detective hasn't been able to obtain any video footage yet, but the photographs are pretty good as evidence. Additionally, I have a list of dates and times of their meetings. At the last word, she curled her beautiful, sensual lips with disgust. I can try to help, I offered, relieved not to be fighting this alone. I'm not sure how exactly yet, but I'll try to work on it. Do you think your lawyer could help me with my divorce papers using some of the evidence you've collected? I would really appreciate it because right now, I have no evidence at all. Janet nodded in agreement. In addition, I will sue Globus. I already have several statements from employees confirming that some of the company's leaders knew about this affair but did nothing to stop it. My lawyer will give these bigwigs a choice, fire them both or face $1 million lawsuit. Wow, I whistled, admiring her determination. I'm certainly impressed. Tomorrow morning, Kirk is playing golf. Can you come to my house around noon? She asked, fixing her piercing blue eyes on me. How could I refuse such an offer? I replied. He won't be there until late evening. I'll show you what I have, and together we can decide on our future strategy. I live at 206 Hemlock Avenue in Crestmont. Okay, it's a date, sorry, not really a date, but you know what I mean, I said, feeling embarrassed. Janet just smiled, gave me a friendly slap on the hand, and we both laughed. I felt more comfortable than ever next to this stunningly beautiful woman. Having agreed to meet, we walked back to the picnic area. As I said, no one missed us during our absence, but now I felt much better. Maybe this whole mess in my life would end soon. At least, I really hoped so. As expected, the next morning Megan announced that she needed to do some shopping and would be gone for a couple of hours. After she left, I dropped the kids off at my mom's and headed to Crestmont. Janet met me at the door, and we went into the home office. There was a beautiful leather sofa, and on the table in front of it was a large computer monitor. The screen showed an image of an empty motel room. She motioned for me to sit down. I have beer, soda, and wine. What would you like? She asked as I settled on the sofa. Regular soda will do, or Pepsi if you have it, I replied. When she returned with a cold can and handed me the soda, I thanked her. So, Janet, would you be so kind as to tell me what's going on? Well, in a few minutes, we'll see how my dear husband plays golf, live and in the most colorful format, she answered, her voice full of caustic sarcasm. I'm amazed. How the hell did you do this? I asked, opening my soda. It cost me $1,400 to put this together, Janet said with a grin. I really hope it was worth it. However, the money I spent was debited from Kirk's card, and he doesn't even know about it. Janet grinned and then continued, I expect this will last about 2 hours, so make yourself comfortable. She suggested, besides drinks, I also have popcorn and nachos to help pass the time. By the way, I'll receive a DVD of the entire session and would be happy to share a copy with you. In fact, I don't really want to watch this spectacle. I winced sourly, but on the other hand, I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. Strange, right? Okay, let the show begin. For the next 20 minutes, while nothing interesting was happening on the screen, Janet and I chatted a bit. She showed me the information she had collected about the affair, and I was truly amazed by the number of photographs, videos, and documents she had. At the same time, I was mentally crushed because now I knew exactly when and how Megan was seeing Kirk. I was surprised to learn that the Langfords had 3 large koi ponds in their backyard. During our conversation, I expressed the hope that I would have the opportunity to admire them and asked Janet if I could bring the children to visit them. She seemed pleased and flattered by my sincere interest and said she would be happy to invite them over. Around the same time, some action began on the monitor, and we had to interrupt our conversation. As Janet had predicted, Kirk and Megan entered the room and wasted no time starting to undress. There was no small talk or even foreplay. They simply took off their clothes and immediately jumped onto the bed. The transmitted image was excellent, but the sound was slightly distorted. However, this didn't matter much since the main evidence was a clear and unambiguous picture of their affair. I think you can understand that I felt a little awkward sitting on the couch next to a near stranger and watching my wife and her lover having passionate intimate. The action unfolding on the monitor only caused me disgust, to say the least. I had to admit that they acted like a well-coordinated team and seemed to be enjoying themselves thoroughly. Janet, I hate to interrupt the show, but do we have to watch all of this? I turned away from the screen and looked at Janet. I understand this isn't something you want to watch, she said with a bit of sympathy. That's for sure, I agreed. Honestly, it's not the most pleasant sight to watch my wife having an intim with another man, especially since I feel a little awkward sitting next to you. Well, all of this is automatically recorded, she waved her hand dismissively. Thanks to these records, we'll have all the necessary evidence for the lawyers. We don't need to look any further. And I also can't say that I'm getting any pleasure from this movie. In any case, the subsequent plot seems quite predictable. What now, Phil? Are you going home or what? Janet asked. Actually, I was hoping you'd show me your koi ponds. I think they would be much more interesting to watch than 2 hours of sweaty activity, I said. Janet's eyes seemed to light up with excitement simply because I showed interest in her favorite hobby. She jumped up from the couch, and as we walked to the back of the house, Megan's screams reached my ears from the video, apparently reaching another climax. Stepping out into the fresh air, I couldn't help but think I was in for a more pleasant time than my wife. Janet's 3 ornamental fish ponds turned out to be truly wonderful. I was particularly interested in the complex water pumping and filtration systems, having spent some time working as a plumber before taking a job at the school. According to Janet, Kirk was not at all helpful with her hobby, and she had to find and hire people herself for all the work required with laying pipes and installing pumps. Hearing this, I, of course, offered to come and help her any time. Kirk went off to play his favorite golf. Honestly, I wasn't trying to hit on Janet, I just wanted to learn more about the koi ponds. However, spending more time with this striking woman was an added bonus. Only after a few hours, which seemed to fly by too quickly, did we return to the house. The picture on the monitor showed that the motel room was already empty, so we decided it was time for me to go home, too. Janet promised to call me when Kirk had his next golf game so that I could come see her again, this time with Sarah and Todd. The next few weeks were difficult. Every time Megan took a shower, I checked her purse. Surprisingly, there was always a new supply of protections in the secret pocket. I couldn't understand when she managed to use them all. I attached a temporarily expropriated safety pin to my keychain and used it to methodically poke holes in the protections she had prepared, expecting any day now that Megan would suddenly want to pay her sister a visit during the evenings when Kirk went off to play golf. Our children, Sarah and Todd, talked to Megan about their visits to the lady with lots of koi, but she never seemed interested in their stories. Sarah and Todd showed Megan pictures of the fish they had drawn and talked about the names they had given them, but Megan never made the connection between Kirk's wife and the koi owner. She seemed relieved that I could keep the kids occupied while she had a night with her lover. I made 2 more attempts to get her to quit her job and stop seeing Kirk. Both times, I received the same refusal, with the second one being particularly dismissive. On top of everything else, I had to come up with all sorts of excuses to avoid night with her, to which Megan responded with several sarcastic remarks about my masculinity. Her derogatory comments hurt my self-esteem a bit, but they also made it easier to justify my recent actions. On Tuesday night, she finally dropped the expected bombshell. Phil, I've been feeling too stressed lately. I'm going to take a few days off from work and go visit my sister. I think for about a week. What do you say? You could watch the kids while I recover a little. Hey, I understand, I immediately responded. You work a lot of overtime and stay late at the office, so yes, I think it would be good for you to relax and unwind. A trip to see your sister is much better than a whole year of sessions with a psychiatrist and also much cheaper. Go and have a good time, and I'll take care of everything. Oh, I'm so glad you understand me, Megan's voice oozed with honey tones. All this overtime work is necessary for the benefit of our family, but it seems I may have overdone it a bit. That night, I had difficulty falling asleep. My thoughts were constantly spinning around what I had to do the next day. What I was really excited about was that it was finally time to act. Megan's sister, Nancy, and her husband, Brad, lived about 3 hours away from us. Brad was a good guy, but completely henpecked. If Nancy said jump, Brad would have jumped without thinking. The most interesting thing was that in the city where they lived, there were 2 clinics that provided abortions. I was prepared for this and already had the names, addresses, and opening hours of both clinics. I even read the terms of service required by each clinic. In both clinics, a 2-day preparation period was required before an abortion for examinations and various tests. This meant that the earliest Megan could book an appointment for the procedure was Friday, assuming her first appointment was on Wednesday. I decided that Megan would try to get everything done as quickly as possible so that she would have a few days to recover before returning home. Thus, I had a day and a half left to plan my own actions. No problem. After Megan left to rest and recuperate, I began arranging my own affairs. I had to explain to my parents what was happening. It was hard to admit that my marriage had failed, but my mom and dad understood and supported me. The kids were happy to stay with them, and Dad's pickup truck would come in handy for transporting Megan's things. I called my lawyer, who said that he had already prepared all the necessary documents, so I could pick them up on Thursday morning. Janet's paperwork was also fully prepared, and she arranged for Kirk to be served with divorce papers at the same time Megan received hers. The only problem with my plan was that I felt I had to give Megan one last chance to make things right, though I didn't hold much hope for this. For the rest of the day, Dad and I were busy gathering and packing Megan's things. On Thursday morning, after 3 hours of driving, I arrived at the first clinic. It turned out to be closed. There was only one left, called the Family Planning Center. I approached the receptionist, putting on the most confident look I could muster. "Good morning. My name is Phil Jenkins. My wife Megan said I had to come and sign a consent form." "What form is this?" The lady looked at me blankly. "Sorry, I don't know the exact name, but as far as I can tell, it's a form that says I understand everything that's going on with my wife. I agree with it, and I won't sue or something like that," I explained. "Wait a minute." The lady ran her fingers over the computer keyboard and then stared at the monitor. "Yes, it was Megan Jenkins, right?" "Yes, exactly. Do you need my ID or something else?" I asked, radiating readiness to claim my rights. She shook her head and clicked her mouse for a few more seconds, checking information about my wife. "Her sister already signed for her, but your signature would really be better." "Wait a minute, I'll get her file." Bingo! Now I just had to hold out for the next couple of minutes. The receptionist placed a form in front of me and asked me to sign below the signature left by Nancy. I noticed that the procedure itself had already been scheduled for 11 o'clock on Friday morning, and they had to arrive at the clinic an hour earlier. "Do we have to pay anything else for this?" I asked, taking my checkbook out of my inside pocket and placing it on the counter. No, your wife has already paid the entire amount, $800, in cash. At the moment, there is no need to pay anything else," she said. "Thank you very much. I appreciate your help." "This makes things much easier," I said, thanking the kind lady before leaving the clinic with a light heart. You won't believe the stunningly warm welcome I received when I unexpectedly arrived at Nancy and Brad's house. The emotions were so false that it was actually quite funny, and I had to work hard not to give myself away. "Megan, what a wonderful surprise. What are you doing here?" Nancy exclaimed. "Well, Mom and Dad wanted to take the children for a few days, so I took sick leave and decided to stop by to see you guys. I thought I could use a little break, too," I said with a completely innocent look. After this news, a surprised silence fell over the room. I saw them start looking at each other, their minds probably racing to figure out how to handle the situation. I had put them in a difficult position, and now they had to find a way out. I noticed Nancy stand up and nod at Brad to join her in the kitchen. Smiling tightly, she hurried out of the room, and Brad rushed after her. While they were in the kitchen, Megan kept me busy with small talk and chattering about various trifles. A few minutes later, Brad returned to the room, now alone. "Phil, I have a great idea," he blurted out with feigned enthusiasm. "Tomorrow, I can take time off from work and borrow a boat from my friend Jack. We can get out of here early and spend the day at the lake. There's excellent fishing there, and sometimes you come across some great catches. Besides, this way, we won't bother the ladies. How do you like that idea, buddy?" He stared at me with a hint of worry. "Sounds tempting, Brad. A calm day on the lake will definitely relieve me of my worries." "It's decided. By the way, find out if Jack can come with us," I said. "Okay, fine. I'll arrange everything," Brad promised, pleased to have successfully completed his task from Nancy. The relief on the faces of all three was evident. We had a serene dinner and spent the rest of the evening chatting about nothing. Intim that night was, of course, out of the question, as Megan didn't want her sister to hear any indecent sounds. The next morning, which turned out to be clear and sunny, Jack showed up early in his pickup truck with a trailer containing a boat. Brad was preparing lunch in the kitchen, filling his thermal bag with beer. We chatted a bit while loading the car and boat with provisions and fishing gear. "Why are you stuck there?" Brad's voice came from the depths of the pickup as I paused at the open passenger door. "Come on, jump in, and let's go. The fish won't catch itself." "No, Brad, I decided not to go," I said, leaving him dumbfounded. "I suggest you and Jack get some rest today because I don't think you'll want to see Nancy in the next few hours." Brad argued with me for another 5 minutes about whether I should go with them or not, until I finally had to be rude. After a few well-chosen curse words and some physical threats, Jack and Brad left. I returned to the house and poured myself a cup of coffee. After some searching, I found Nancy's cell phone and turned it off. I then picked up the landline and dialed my father's number. He always got up early, so Dad and I talked for about 2 hours. During our conversation, the incoming call waiting signal came on about 6 times. It must have been Brad trying in vain to reach Nancy. He never succeeded and finally gave up. Then I heard some noises coming from upstairs. Apparently Nancy and Megan were waking up and getting ready. I said goodbye to my father and prepared for the inevitable fireworks. I cleared the home phone's answering machine of Brad's missed calls and turned Nancy's cell phone back on. In less than 2 hours, both sisters were supposed to be at the family planning center. I had to face 2 angry and hissing cats soon. Well, I was ready. The boys and I had already drained the first coffee pot, so I filled it up and sent a new one for my loving wife and her sister. "Phil, what the hell are you doing here?" Megan gasped, stopping abruptly at the kitchen threshold. "For some reason, I didn't want to spend the whole day fishing," I answered, shrugging. "I decided to spend the day with you too. I was thinking we could go to some nice place and have lunch together. What do you think of the idea?" I needed to get home that night, so I didn't want to spend the whole day with Brad and Jack in that stinking boat. No, this won't work," they began to shout, glancing at each other. Megan took the floor. "Nancy and I have some plans for today, and we prefer to go into the city together. I can go with you anywhere and at any time, but Nancy and I only see each other a couple of times a year." "Damn it, you'll be here all week, Megan," I protested. "I think you can give me at least half a day since I've come all this way. You'll have the rest of the week to do your girly things with your sister." Nancy grabbed her cell phone and hurried out of the kitchen, hitting the speed dial button along the way. Megan collapsed into the nearest kitchen chair, curling up as if a truck had just crashed into her stomach. Even a few walls away, we could hear Nancy on the phone yelling at poor Brad, as if he had just committed the crime of the century. I felt sorry for the guy, but he married her with his eyes open. "Phil, I don't want to fight about this, but Nancy and I really don't want you following us around today. Our whole day is scheduled minute by minute, and you don't fit into it at all," Megan said angrily, her voice clearly approaching storm level. Okay, I raised my palms. "Tell me what your plans are for today, and then I'll decide what to do. If I don't like it, I'll do something else. And I still don't understand what the problem is because you have a whole week ahead of you here, and I only have today. Listen, are you by any chance dating a couple of guys?" I threw in, assuming it was a joke. "No, damn it, We're not dating any guys." Megan began to boil. "We just wanted to go shopping and maybe buy a few intimate items, like panties and cute nightgowns, and we don't want you hanging around and staring at us when we try them on." "Well, most of these stores are located in a shopping center, so I can occupy myself with other things while you're in the fitting rooms," I said calmly, not at all intending to make life easier for these two conspirators. "We'll go to the center together, and then I'll go about my business and won't disturb you. Seriously, girls, you don't have to worry about entertaining me. When it's time for lunch, I'll take you to some fancy place to make up for any possible inconvenience." I suggested this with my most innocent eyes, looking from Megan to her sister, who had reappeared in the kitchen. Nancy stood in the doorway, filled with bile, and glared at me. However, she did not say a word, apparently awaiting Megan's decision. My wife realized she wouldn't be able to convince me and seemed ready to give up. Finally, Megan, after playing with her fingers for a few seconds, stood up and said, "I need to go get dressed," since both of them were still in their dressing gowns. She quickly left the kitchen, sweeping past Nancy, who barely had time to step aside in the doorway. Nancy looked back at me and spat, "You're a real boring fifth place, you know that?" Following this, she turned around and hurried upstairs after Megan. A wide and satisfied smile spread across my face. After about 20 minutes of muttering and creaking floors in the bedrooms, the call button on the house phone lit up. Apparently, someone upstairs was calling someone. The clock was ticking, they had an hour left to get to the center. I was trying to figure out my next step. If they tried to sneak out of the house without me, I would just follow them and make sure they knew about it. However, I didn't think they would dare to try that trick. 20 minutes later, both of them came downstairs. "Okay, Phil, let's go shopping." "We're ready," Megan announced as if nothing had happened. This turned out to be a little easier than I thought. The call upstairs I witnessed must have been to Planned Parenthood, and I bet they arranged to reschedule the clinic appointment. Since I mentioned I was heading home that evening, they probably decided the best way to solve the problem was to wait until I left. I wasn't trying to stop Megan from having an abortion, but I was trying to make it harder for her. When the three of us left the house, I insisted on taking my car because I wanted to drive myself. All I needed was for these two to leave me somewhere along the road and run away. After driving a few miles from the house, I turned into the nearest service station. Slowly and methodically, I filled the tank, checked the oil and water levels, and thoroughly wiped the windshield. This was the longest time I had ever spent servicing my car in my conscious driving life. All this time, I glanced out of the corner of my eye at the sisters fidgeting in their seats. They were simply seething with anger. This meant my plan was working, and in the most excellent way. When we arrived at the shopping center, I parked further away so we could take a proper stroll. As soon as our little group was inside the mall, I practically left them alone, though I kept an eye on them from afar. I didn't care what they were doing or what they were buying. They didn't look like they were having fun. They spent most of the time discussing something rather emotionally and gesticulating nervously. However, the conspirators bought a few things just to show me that they were shopping. I tried to stay in the shadows but not let them out of sight. The heated discussion between the sisters was definitely about something serious. While we maneuvered around the shopping center, the time for the appointment at the clinic passed, so I managed to delay the inevitable for a while. Of course, I understood that Megan would still have the procedure, so I wasn't going to interfere further with the course of things. Shortly after noon, Nancy and Megan returned to the mall's central courtyard, where I had arranged for them to finish their shopping. We had lunch at a nice Olive Garden restaurant and returned home around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. On the way home and even during lunch, there was little conversation. I tried to restrain myself, but I couldn't help smiling. I knew these two hated me right now, but I didn't care. What a wonderful feeling. After lunch, I grabbed a couple of bottles of beer from the refrigerator and relaxed on the couch. Soon, Brad finally returned home from his fishing trip and was immediately bombarded with verbal abuse from Nancy, which lasted at least half an hour. Unable to withstand such an aggressive attack, Brad barely slipped out the door and disappeared for a couple of hours. He returned for dinner, and when I saw him for a second, it seemed to me that after the verbal battle with his wife, the poor fellow's face had flattened a little and his ears had curled into tubes. But perhaps in the twilight, I only imagined it. After the girls finished with the dishes, I asked Brad and Nancy if Megan and I could talk privately in the kitchen. Nancy gave me one of her amused grins, and they both walked into the living room. It was clear from Megan's appearance that she was still upset about what had happened that day, and in her state, it would be difficult for me to find common ground with her. First of all, Megan, I would like to ask you again, could you please, I insisted, quit your job and stop dating Kirk Langford? Her cheekbones tensed as Megan clenched her jaw and apparently could only barely restrain herself from hitting me. Damn it, I don't want to hear that crap ever again, she hissed through her teeth. I'm tired of you constantly harping on this, and I'm not going to waste my time answering your stupid questions anymore. You already know the answer. He's the same as he's always been, and that won't change now either. Change the record or get the hell out of here, she said irritably, her eyes flashing. Not surprised by what I heard, I reached for a voluminous envelope made of thick manila paper that was lying next to me on the chair and took out another envelope of regular size from it. Well, Megan, I've asked you this at least 10 times over the past 2 months, and each time you refused to comply with my request. I had no other choice, I warned her, sighing. Megan, here are the divorce papers. I put my hand on the large envelope. All you have to do is sign them and mail them. As you can see, they come with a stamped, self-addressed envelope. If you decide that you need a lawyer to review the papers, please do so. That is your right. Megan looked at me intently, then leaned forward, looming in front of me and resting her hands on the table. You are stupid, she growled angrily. You can't divorce me just because I don't want to quit my job or only hang out with friends you approve of. If you want a divorce, you must have good reasons for this, and you don't have them. She pushed away from the table and stepped back, sitting on the chair and leaning back. The look in her eyes was cold and hard. Her straight back and crossed arms indicated that my stubborn wife was not going to compromise. I think it's time for you to go home and pull yourself together, she continued. I'm your wife, and I don't intend to leave my home and family just because you don't like where and with whom I work. Well, that means it's time to launch a counterattack, I said evenly. Megan, why did you come to visit your sister this week? What a witty question, she said sarcastically. You yourself know why. We discussed this before I came here. It was a lie, and you know it, I stated in the same measured manner. So what was the real reason? Come on, tell me, since you're such an all-knowing idiot. Megan scoffed again. Why did you and Nancy go to Planned Parenthood on Wednesday? I asked, looking into her eyes and laying out my first trump card. The kitchen suddenly became very quiet. My beloved wife seemed to shrink a little and began to fidget slightly in her chair. It seemed that some of her bravado had also disappeared. I don't understand what you're talking about, she muttered a couple of tones lower. I leaned over the table, bringing my face closer to hers, and asked in a quiet, gloomy tone, for what purpose did you pay Planned Parenthood $800 in cash? Bam! Here comes blow number 2, which seemed to lead to some kind of knockdown, because this time there was no response at all from the other side of the table. Megan seemed to be looking in my direction, but her gaze appeared directed anywhere but at me. It was obvious that she was feeling quite awkward right now. You could even hear her swallow as if she had something bad tasting stuck in her mouth. So why did you make an appointment at Planned Parenthood for 11 in the morning? What exactly were they going to do for you for the $800 you paid them? I continued to press Megan, not giving her a chance to take a break or come up with new lies. Damn you! Stop bothering me with something you have no idea about. It's none of your damn business why I was there or what I did. Megan's anger flared up with renewed vigor, forcing her to raise her voice. Megan, they perform abortions at Planned Parenthood. I countered her attacks with my knowledge. You know it, I know it, and everyone in this town knows it. And since I've tied myself up a long time ago for your convenience, why on earth did you need to have an abortion? I think your operation wasn't as successful as you think, she said. Maybe you better check yourself. In response, I took out another envelope that had been waiting for its turn. Here are 3 laboratory reports, from 2 months ago, from a month ago, and from last week. In bed, I only shoot blanks, and I have all the documents confirming this. Now, Megan, would you like to show me the report from Planned Parenthood that says you are not pregnant? You are a real stupid man, she snapped, not wanting to give up even in the face of obvious and indisputable facts. But this is still not enough to justify a divorce. Why the hell not? Just admit that you've been messing around with Kirk Langford for the last 6 months and get it over with. We are both adults and know what really happened, and you continue to blatantly lie and dodge. I couldn't stand it this time and flared up. Because you have no evidence that I did anything with anyone other than you, she snapped. And in general, I don't want to sit here for a minute longer and listen to you rant about something that never happened. So you never had an intimate with Kirk Langford? I asked. No, she exploded. I am your wife, and I only had a night with you. Then how the hell did you get pregnant for the first time after Jesus, the Holy Spirit, descended on our sinful earth, and the second Immaculate Conception happened? A painful silence fell between us. Megan bit her lower lip hard, her eyebrows knitted together, and an alarming crease appeared on her tense forehead. There was no way she could answer this question without incriminating herself. Did you satisfy his manhood? I asked directly. No, I didn't do that, came the answer, too hasty to be true. I pulled out a stack of photographs from my trusty manila envelope. 6 colorful photos appeared on the table, proving that she was lying. Now her face turned pale. Did you have a night with him? I asked a new question. There was no answer, so I laid out a solitaire game of 6 more photographs on the table, showing them in different poses. When I put another stack of photographs on the table, she couldn't stand it and started screaming at me. Stop it! That's enough, damn it! Enough! Okay, fine, I said. I see that you were spying on me. Megan snorted with venom in her voice. I would have thought she would break down and be ashamed of her betrayal, but that was not the case. Instead, I became the main accused again. You're a damn mean stupid, you know that? She angrily attacked me. If you knew something was going on, why didn't you just stop it like a real man? No, all you do is sneak around and take pictures like some dirty pervert. I'm sick of your pathetic whining. Just then, my cell phone rang, and I took it from the table. Hi, Dad. Okay, 10 minutes will be just right. Thank you for calling. As soon as I disconnected, she immediately blurted out, what does all of this mean? This means that Dad is already bringing your things here to Nancy. He should arrive in about 10 minutes. By the way, our house now has new locks. If we forgot to pack something, just let me know, and I will pass it on to you. Megan's face turned into a frozen mask, and she was petrified in her chair, unable to utter a word. I took out something else from the same envelope. Here are the documents for your car. I copied them to you. Here in this envelope is half the money from our bank accounts, about $1,200. Having pushed the envelope with all the papers to the other edge of the table, I continued, as for the children, here's my proposal, you will have the right to see them once a week. I am willing to allow you to stay in the house overnight provided that you make a written statement about your connection with Kirk Langford, and it will be certified by a notary. Oh, I almost forgot, I raised my finger. I still have a DVD that I didn't have time to show you. It contains a recording of you and Kirk's visit to the Scandia Motel on May 10th. The video lasts 2 hours and shows very clearly and in all details how you two were tumbling there and doing everything that is shown in these photographs. Having collected all the pictures on the table into a pile and waving them in the air, I said, just so you know, I personally didn't do any of them. I really didn't care what you did with him. I just really don't like being taken for a fool, and the last thing I'd like to do is leave you this souvenir as a memory of our former love. I removed the safety pin from my key fob and handed it to Megan across the table. What? What the hell is this? She muttered, staring at the small object glinting on my palm as if it were some kind of disgusting insect. This, dear wife, is the pin I used to poke tiny little holes in all your protections for the last 2 months. I wonder if you know that in the last couple of weeks alone, you've used 48 rubber bands. Apparently, old Kirk was getting more intimate from you than I ever dreamed of. He's just a lucky guy. You pathetic little weasel, she squealed. This is the most disgusting thing I've ever heard. You really are a dirty idiot. No, dear, I replied, the most disgusting thing is to have a night with someone to whom you are not married. I may be a man, but you are the ultimate cheater. Outside the window, the noise of an approaching car was heard. Rising from the table, I threw the safety pin, which had played its role, on top of the manila envelope with documents and photos. "Now excuse me, I need to run. I see Dad just drove up to the house. By the way, in case you haven't noticed, you never apologized for what you did or asked for forgiveness. I don't think you deserve to remain my wife. Goodbye, Megan, and enjoy your abortion on Monday." When I finally left the kitchen, the sounds of her sobs followed me. Nancy, like a mother hen, rushed from the next room to comfort her sister. Brad followed me out onto the porch. "What the hell are you doing, dude?" he exclaimed, grabbing my hand. "You two have been married for 14 years. You can't just throw it all away because of some misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding? Brad, do you know exactly why my wife came to visit you and Nancy?" I asked sarcastically. Carefully releasing my sleeve, he looked at his feet for several seconds, then looked up at me apologetically. "Sorry, Phil. Let me help you unload the pickup." We unloaded the truck in about 10 minutes. All this time, Megan's lamentations and sobs could be heard from the kitchen, intensifying and then subsiding slightly. I didn't know why she was crying, and to be honest, I didn't care. Kirk and Megan were fired from Globus the following week. Megan refused to sign the affidavit. However, the lawyer said he already had strong enough arguments for the court. After leaving Nancy and Brad's house, I heard nothing more from my loving wife after that evening. She didn't even show up to visit the children, who didn't seem to mind or miss her too much as they had developed a good connection with Janet. We spent a lot of time together, mostly as one big, outgoing family. During this period, Janet and I did not have a night or even talk about it. We weren't going to do anything that would jeopardize our divorces. The kids and I learned a lot about Koi and had a great time watching them. Finally, after 4 months, both divorces were officially finalized. Megan never fought the inevitable, but Kirk went down kicking and screaming. He lost his home, all his financial investments, and ended up paying large monthly alimony payments. A few days before Christmas, Megan finally showed up on our doorstep with gifts for the children. I was polite to her and didn't do anything that could ruin everyone's holiday spirit. She stayed with us for about 2 hours and then left as quietly as she had come. During this time, not a word was said between us about the divorce or her affair. Shortly after New Year's, I put the house on the market, and 2 months later, my kids and I moved in with Janet. Kirk, I heard, took a job in Omaha, and Megan went there with him. 4 months later, her lover disappeared somewhere in the vastness of the great American plains without even telling her where he was going. Megan returned to Nancy after Brad left for Alaska, where he found a well-paying job on an oil pipeline. A couple of months later, Nancy received divorce papers in the mail. I'm sure these two sisters are great company for each other. Janet and I are very comfortable with each other. She adores children, and they respond to her with sincere affection. We are planning to get married in June and are preparing for our honeymoon whenever possible. We also remember the wise proverb, life experience is the best teacher, it charges dearly but explains it clearly. What do you think of our story today? I think this story shows how smart a man can be at the most appropriate and necessary time for himself. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.